All right, we're heading into week 2 here. Week 1 really played out similar to what we had. We had 4 close games there with Lena Winslow and West Carroll, Amboy and Milledgeville, Polo and Orangeville, and then the AFC and River Ridge matchup as well. All those games within 2 scores. Most of them went the way we had thought that they would. We were split on AFC River Ridge and on Polo and Orangeville.
Right.
So, and actually, that's where
we all said each other. Right?
Yeah. But overall, the remaining 5 games were pretty much non-contested in the direction that we felt the teams would take in those games. Have a lot to look forward to this week. There's going to be quite a few tighter games this week, we feel. Some big matchups that are going to prove vital for standings, not just after week 2, but possibly later down the road as we get to the end of the season, get the conference alignment set up for the playoff picture.
Right. In one of those matchups we'll get to in a little bit, it's kind of a shame it has to happen in week 2, but that's what happens when every week is a big week, pretty much. So you're playing big-time games early. Wish it'd be later in the season when both teams are really full speed and geared toward the playoffs, but nonetheless, it should be a fun week. Like you said, a lot of good games going forward.
There are, and I'm just excited to get the thing kicked off. So here we go. Warren at Aquin. Warren is coming into this game with an 0-1 record after they lost to Stockton in week 1, 43-0. And Aquin comes in with a 1-0 record after they beat Kirkland Hiawatha 27-7. Shane, last year in this meeting, Aquin won this game in week 1 in a very tightly contested 25-22 victory against Warren, who would end up going 2-7 in the season. Obviously, this year is a bit different, specifically more so for Warren with the different in the rosters. What do you think this game's going to look like as we get down to Friday night?
Well, like you said, last year's game was close, and I don't necessarily think we even saw that coming so much. It was a little bit of a surprise. Aquin played some close games that we weren't quite sure what kind of team they were, and we ultimately found out by their playoff success, but going into this week, I just think that it's going to be hard going for Warren. I mean, Aquin's a good team. Played close with Hiawatha, but, I mean, that was a pretty sloppy game. This is a game against Hiawatha that they felt like they probably should have won going away easily. So you got a week of practice to clean some things up, get those week 1 jitters out of there, and get focused for Warren, which might not be the team that it was a couple of years ago.
Well, and that's one of the things about that Aquin-Hiawatha matchup. I mean, Aquin did commit 5 turnovers in the second quarter, one of those being returned for the lone score for Hiawatha, which resulted in the 7-7 tie at halftime, which really had a lot of people surprised. But then Aquin really started getting things rolling there in the second half as they got the run game going, were able to start spreading things out, and really took control of the game. And I feel that had they played a cleaner first half, you probably would have seen a much wider spread in that final score.
Right. It's just one of those things where you have a couple mistakes and you let a team hang around, and sometimes you can end up losing those games, but I don't feel like Aquin was ever in jeopardy of losing that game. It was just one of those things, we were checking scores when we were at our game, and it's like, oh my goodness, Hiawatha and Aquin are tied. We definitely can see that as we see Aquin being projected as the conference champ. So, strange things happen in week 1. Obviously, things to improve on for Aquin, just like any other team.
Right.
So, I mean, I look forward to seeing an improved Aquin team this week.
And it's just one of those things that goes to show you, I mean, you really got to look at each game for what it is, and you have to come ready to play each and every week. Now, for Warren, on the other hand, they had a tough time with Stockton in that 43-0 game. Didn't get a lot of insight from that game outside of Stockton had a lot of rushing yards.
Right.
So that was a good start for Stockton to get that boost for them, especially under new coach Jesse Snyder over there. Get that first game out of the way, get the victory under the belt, and build that confidence as you go on throughout the remainder of the season. For Warren, though, they really got a lot to work on. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot to work with, and that's going to be a problem when they face the Bulldogs come Friday night. Granted, Aquin's in the same situation, not a lot of players, but the talent gap is a lot bigger, I feel.
Right, and that's something we were talking about earlier. You know, small school football has a way of cycling. You know, a couple of years ago, Warren was very competitive, found back-to-back playoff appearances. You know, we're starting to get into the dry years where you're back to a similar situation when people were wanting that co-op with River Ridge. You know, you're knocking on the door of needing more players. Obviously, last year they had that co-op, and it didn't exactly go well. And you know, they broke off and formed their own team, and we saw what happened there too. So Warren's going to have some tough times ahead. Just keep battling, though.
Yep, you got to keep fighting, keep going forward. Shane, who do you pick to win this game?
Aquin, for sure.
I agree with you on that. I will take Aquin as well. In Orangeville, they will be hosting River Ridge. Both teams come in this game 0-1 as River Ridge lost last week to AFC 19-6. And Orangeville lost in an interesting matchup with Polo 20-12. Shane, last year in this matchup, Orangeville won this game 36-20, right in the middle of River Ridge's two other wins as they were starting to get good at the end of the season. And it also sparked Orangeville to that 4-4 mark in that Week 9 showdown with Polo at that potential possibility of getting in the playoffs. Being that they only won by 2 scores last year, both teams basically returning the bulk of the same players. I could see this game being another very good contest, but either team is really going to need to get this win if they want to make the playoffs. And it's hard to say that because it's only week 2, but you got to start somewhere, and that's this week.
Right. I mean, that's something we talk about every week, really. Not so much on the upstate side, even though it's really the same thing. I mean, we usually talk about must-win games on the Northwest side because the talent gap is so different, to say. You know, Orangeville, going off that game against Polo, probably a little bit disappointed, but, you know, I picked Orangeville to win, as I have a lot of games this year. They got to get back on track against River Ridge. I think that's a very winnable game. And, you know, you said a lot of people returning for River Ridge, so they probably feel a very winnable game too. But, you know, Orangeville might struggle a little bit until they get one of their key contributors back on the offensive side of the ball. That really helps open up their passing game.
Yeah, it does. And, I mean, if you look at what Orangeville did do Friday night, it was kind of a one-man show with Austin Guy. I mean, he led the team in rushing. He had a tough night passing the ball. I'm sure that came from some pressure from Polo as well. But he had that huge 70-yard kickoff return as well. On the other hand, Polo pretty much was also a one-man show with Reed Taylor basically carrying the bulk of everything for them as well. River Ridge, they did get that one score in there against AFC. Very tightly close contest there as well. I do see a lot of parity in the upstate side of the division as you just go down from tier to tier to tier. I mean,
right.
Outside of big favorites in Aquin and obviously some struggles that we could see with Warren, the other 6 teams really are in a dogfight to see who can make the playoffs this year, in my opinion.
Right. You know, that's something that we're going to see pretty much every week when we go to check our scores or people are sending us in scores. You're going to see a lot of games that are close, and at the time you're not really going to know which way to feel about it. Like I picked the Milledgeville and Amboy game, and there was another game we were like, oh, okay, or the Aquin-Hiawatha game, even though we obviously predict Aquin to be conference champ. But, you know, you look at that group of teams, and it's a battle every night. You know, it might be one of those situations where they just beat up on each other.
And that's what I am seeing. I mean, which is great for the conference in its own right, because it makes for a lot of competitive ball games.
Right, it's
so it makes
entertaining.
it fun for the players, it makes it fun for the fans, and it makes it fun for the parents that go to the games as well, because you want to obviously push these kids to be the best and compete and have fun doing it at the same time.
Right, and like you said, I myself am a firm believer in close games, whether the talent on the field is at the level it should be, or whether it's two lower end teams battling out. You know, you really like to see those close games. Like you said, it's fun for the players. Actually, feel like you're in meaningful games. I mean, nobody wants to travel 2 hours to lose 60-0, and nobody wants to travel to see that. By the time you get there at the end of the first quarter, you're pushing running clock. So it's fun that you get those close games.
Yeah, it makes it fun all the way around, but it shows you how tough the conference is in general. Being that this game is taking place in Orangeville, I do like the Broncos in this game, and that's my pick to win.
Yeah, and I couldn't disagree with that at all. I pick Orangeville to get back on the winning track here.
Big game here is Marquette at Stockton. Both teams coming to this game 1-0. Marquette obviously being ranked in the top 10, Stockton being ranked in the top 20 as far as the Class 1A rankings go. Last week, Marquette beat Mooseheart 56-0, while Stockton beat Warren 43-0. So really, both games were blowouts. And their last meeting was actually just 2 years ago in the second round of the playoffs that saw Marquette advance to the semifinals for the first time. And Marquette won that game 21-14 in Stockton. And I tell you what, Shane, talking to some Marquette people here earlier in the week, even though the week's still young, but they're excited about coming up to Stockton and getting away from their conference and actually playing some football.
Well, I'd be willing to bet the same could be said for Stockton fans. You know, we talked about this last week. Anytime you get a chance to go somewhere, see some different teams. I mean, how many times haven't we talked over the years back when the conference was a 2 and 3A school? Man, why can't they play some of the track teams? I mean, realistically, it's no different than this. I mean, we covered Marquette a couple different times last year because they played Forreston and Dakota and Aquin. I mean, it gave us a chance to see Marquette. And obviously Marquette had seen Stockton before. You know, they have a little playoff history there. Exciting. You know, Marquette travels very well. It should be a great atmosphere at Stockton on Friday night.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Crusader fans showing up in Stockton at 4:30 in the afternoon, pulling up their RVs and getting ready to tailgate for that game.
They throw a party, so definitely it'll be a little bit of a playoff atmosphere early for Stockton this year.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a great benefit for Stockton. Win or lose, this is going to be a game that can definitely give them that playoff test early in the season and at least see where they're at so they know what they need to work on going forward. I mean, it is only week 2, so if they win, that's great. If they lose, okay. You still know what you got going on. You know what you're going to have to work on moving forward as you get further on in the conference schedule.
Well, that's just it for Stockton, for sure. I mean, Marquette probably won't take as much away from this game as Stockton can, because where we have Marquette ranked and where we think they're going to be, you know, you're talking about a team that's had back-to-back semifinal appearances. This is a team who returns a lot of their players from those teams. So obviously, this game will give Stockton a good gauge of where they want to be by the end of the year.
So that is very true, and I mean, we know that Stockton has a lot to work on.
Right.
Obviously, they're still got to learn new systems, and they came out last week very well performed against Warren, albeit a inferior opponent in that game.
Didn't tell us much because it went exactly how we thought it would. I mean, we might have said it'd be a little closer, but Stockton didn't jump out to that enormous lead right off the bat like they have in years past when they had those stellar teams. So this kind of tells you a little bit, you know, they're not quite where they want to be, but they'll get there. Right,
and Marquette playing Mooseheart, granted that's a conference game, but River Ridge will see Mooseheart later on in the season as well in Week 9 in a non-conference matchup. So Marquette putting up 56 points on opening night against Mooseheart really probably was not much of a struggle either for them.
Didn't have any controversial field goals in that game, that's for
No,
sure.
there was nothing that needed to decide that outcome.
Right.
It was pretty much one and done and
Right.
gone. But Shane, I do pick the Crusaders to beat the Blackhawks in this game. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I just think that Stockton's not quite up to the par of Marquette at this time, although it could be a close, interesting game for a while. We'll see what happens. I'd love to see the Blackhawks pull one out, though.
Yeah, we always want to see the NUIC do good, so I agree with you. I want to see the Blackhawks win, but like you just stated, I think the Crusaders are just going to have a little too much more at this time in the season for Stockton to handle. Dakota at AFC is an interesting matchup as both teams come in at 1-0. Neither team has played each other before in the past, so this is a first time ever meeting. Last week, Dakota did beat Galena 35-0 rather convincingly, while AFC also put together a win against River Ridge 19-6. Shane, what do you feel the concept of this game is going to look like as we break it down?
Well, for AFC, the first thing we're going to have to do is learn how to control Trey Engelbrecht. That was quite obvious in the game against Galena. He pretty much took over the game early and put the game away for Dakota right away. So containing him is going to be crucial for AFC. And just when you think you got him contained, you got Grant Gallagher to contain, and you also have Peters to contain as well. So AFC is going to have their hands full as far as the run-stop defense is concerned.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things I saw about Dakota last week against Galena. It kind of, minus the speed and tempo of Forreston, the misdirection and the dives and the leads and even getting some play-action passes in there really remind me a lot about how Forreston runs a lot of their games. You know, you'd have the dive up the middle with Peters, and then you'd have the quick attack to the outside, and then you'd have the reverse counter off to the side.
It was almost a new look that really suited them very well, I felt.
Yes, they did a lot of good things against Galena Friday night that if they get those things going, like you said, I mean, Trey Engelbrecht took over that game both offensively and defensively against Galena, and it was quite the surprise to see.
Well, and that's just like what you're talking there, and you know, as much as we praise the offense, their defensive effort, minus a few plays in the secondary that were almost disastrous, but they weren't. Dakota played a heck of a defensive game, and you know, AFC is going to have to find a way to move the ball, and I feel like their best chance of doing that is going to have to be through the air, because if you didn't notice, which I'm sure you did, the run defense on Dakota was very good for a week one game.
Oh, yes. I mean, they only held Galena 42 yards rushing, which is at least the Galena teams of the last 30-some years. That's very hard to do,
Right.
As we all very well know. Obviously, we know that Galena's hit some tough times and don't look for them to be a contender in the NUIC Northwest this year. But
unless you're me and you pick them to win 5 games like an idiot, so.
But AFC they do have some weapons with Adam Hart in the backfield. They do have Caleb Drew at quarterback, and yeah, he can throw the ball around. He's got Cody Pennick that he can hit. AFC does have a solid line anchored by Mike Thompson on both the offensive and defensive line. So I think that AFC has the potential to make this a game. But they're going to have to come out better against Dakota than they did against River Ridge if they want to have a chance to beat Dakota, I feel.
Right, that's a no-brainer. The talent level on Dakota is far superior to River Ridge. It's just, unfortunately, I mean, good for Dakota, but unfortunately that's the way it is in the bottom part of the upstate compared to the top of the Northwest. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Basically every week we can make that argument. The big thing I take out of this game is Dakota's going to have to stay focused. We've listed a bunch of things on what AFC can do to Dakota, but the biggest thing that Dakota needs to avoid is looking at that Week 3 matchup against Forreston.
Right, you got to come in ready to play this game and not looking ahead to Week 3, because if you look ahead to Week 3 with that matchup with Forreston,
a much closer game than you think.
AFC could put a blindside into you. And I expect AFC to play very well They are a lot stronger. They're physical, but again, there's going to be a little bit of advantage for Dakota as they just have a few more numbers, a few more athletes. So I do like Dakota in this matchup.
And I have to take the Indians on the road as well.
Okay, so EPC is playing host to Amboy. Amboy comes to this game with an 0-1 record after they lost to Milledgeville last week, 14-6. And EPC comes in with the expected 1-0 record that we pretty much anticipated them having, beating East Dubuque a little bit more handily than we thought it might be based off of last year. But then again, this is 2017. EPC won that game 56-7. Shane, in this matchup, EPC and Amboy last year played to a 34-13 game in favor of the Wildcats. Do you see a lot of that taking place again this year?
You know, I really, don't get me wrong, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now and pick EPC to win. That's my pick. As far as this game goes, I really don't know. Because you look at this game last year, and we all thought, okay, EPC is going to roll Amboy. That wasn't the case. But last week we picked EPC to win a close one against East Dubuque. Whether, we didn't really get a ton of feedback from that game, other than, it was a drubbing. So, and then
what more feedback do
we need? And then, by the looks of it, based on our research, Milledgeville probably should have beat Amboy a lot more handily than what they did. Milledgeville made some mistakes. I like EPC big in this game. I don't think it'll be 56-7 big like last week. So I guess to answer your question, if EPC were to win 34-13 again, yeah, I could see that being possibly the same.
Yeah, Amboy still has quite a bit of size, and they got athletes coming back. But really, granted, we know Milledgeville's going to be good this year, but they're going to be good on the upstate side of the division. So that win by Milledgeville over Amboy
says a lot.
It says a lot for Milledgeville, but it's just
bad for Amboy.
A lot of bad for Amboy. I don't think they're going to have what it takes to compete with that upper level of the Northwest Conference, albeit right here, right now, you're playing EPC week 2, and as far as the AP is concerned, that's your number 5 ranked team in Class 1A, while they're also receiving votes to be ranked in Class 2A as well. So
the good AP.
I know. I don't know what the AP's thinking, but we don't care.
Yeah.
I
look for EPC to get out and really pound the ball, do what they do well. The big thing is Amboy's gonna have to keep their composure right from the get-go. Realistically, last week we talked about if East Dubuque scores first, maybe they'll beat EPC. That obviously didn't hold true at all. Granted, they didn't score first, but still.
They barely scored.
So, until we really get out and see EPC, because we picked them to be down and then they come out and basically show it in our face, we don't really know what.
Well, we didn't really pick EPC to be down. We're just comparing this year's team to last year's team.
Right.
We both know that
down from last year's team.
We both know that they're strong. We both expect them to make the playoffs.
Finish among the top teams in the Northwest. It's just from a year-to-year basis, that prediction, really. So,
right.
And I guess we could go ahead and see with us picking the way Amboy was, what we see them. Yeah, I could see this being and getting out of hand.
I do too. I like EPC in this game, and I think they're going to roll their way to another big win. All right, East Dubuque is playing host to the Galena Pirates. Both teams come into this game 0-1 after they both lost in week 1. Galena lost to Dakota in 35-0, which we previously mentioned, and East Dubuque lost 56-7 to EPC in the matchup that we just went over previous. Shane, last year in this game, East Dubuque beat Galena 28-7. At the time, it was kind of surprising because it was still at a point where we were trying to figure out how good East Dubuque was as they started off the season 3-0, and we were also trying to figure out, is Galena bad, or was that just a fluke when they lost to Amboy, and then the losses just kept piling up for the Pirates. This year, obviously we've already seen Galena play. I hate to say it, but wasn't very impressed. I mean, they have athletes. There's no doubt about that. They have a quarterback that can throw the ball in Mickey Loreno. They have receivers. They just have a lot of key areas that they need to work on to get organization back in there and get. I mean, they had some good-sized line players too, but it seemed like at the start of the second half they were already dead tired. Like they didn't have a conditioning program during the off season.
Well, that's just it. You know, you look at the team, and I mean their physical appearance really, and you're looking, okay. You watch the quarterback. Okay, he's got a good arm. Running backs are fairly quick, but have the explosive, have a build to them. Strong. Yeah. Line looks good. Receivers look decent. What's going on? I mean, like you said, you can put a lot of things into it. People can draw their own conclusion on what's going on. A lot of football is what's going on up here, not necessarily down here. But yeah, if you're not in football shape and you go to Dakota in week 1, you're going to find out what you need to work on.
Right. I mean, and it's just hard to believe where Galena has kind of fallen to in just 2 years' time, off of a run that basically spanned 30-some years and only 3 playoff misses, along with 3 state titles, a runner-up, and numerous quarterfinal and semifinal appearances.
Well, you talk to people, and nobody wants, and we'll get to East Dubuque too. We don't want to make this solely about Galena, but you talk to people, and everybody. I mean, Galena has been at the top of the conference for decades. So obviously, you've rubbed some people wrong in your winning ways. So you talk to people around. Oh, good that Galena's down, but this conference as a whole is better when Galena's playing well, and unfortunately, that's just not the case this year.
That's true. Now, as far as East Dubuque goes, like you said, we're going to get to them. The Warriors have a lot of returning players back, too. Not sure, like you said, the details. I mean, basically what we got was their defense could not stop the run. EPC basically ran at them in all directions. Jaden and Jared Kemple both leading the charge against the Warriors. And East Dubuque didn't have an answer to stop that, which is somewhat surprising, although not totally surprising. I'm more surprised at the gap of the score, not the fact that EPC won. I expected EPC to win, picked them to win, predict them to go 7-2. So I'm not surprised that they won. I'm just surprised that it was the shellacking that it was.
Well, and if you remember last week, I said East Dubuque's going to have a crucial step, and that's going to be to score first. Because last year they got into the you don't score first, and it was a snowball effect. Obviously we didn't cover the game. We're not exactly sure what went on. I know that you can look at 56-7 a whole lot of different ways, but it's still a butt kicking, so it is what it is.
Yeah, it is. Both these teams are obviously looking to regroup going into week 2. I do feel that both have the opportunity to make things work moving forward, knowing what they have back, both teams. But I do like the Warriors at home, so I'm picking East Dubuque.
I'll take East Dubuque as well, get in that win column, get some confidence going, and see what the season has to bring.
Du-Pec and West Carroll is going to be played in Mount Carroll for the first time in 14 years that Mount Carroll will host a game. That's amazing.
It's been a long time.
It has been.
I've never seen a game there.
Me neither, because we never played Mount Carroll back when they actually had their own team. So, Du-Pec comes in this game 0-1 after they lost their home opener as the Du-Pec Rivermen 54-6 to Forreston, and West Carroll also comes in at 0-1 after they lost a decent battle with Lena Winslow 34-20 on the road last week. Last year in this game, albeit this was just against Pectonica, West Carroll did beat Pectonica 48-12. Obviously, this is not the same Pectonica team as last year, but looking at the game that they had against Forreston, there's still a lot more that needs to take place for Du-Pec to become a more competitive ball club.
Well, that's just it. You're looking year to year, and it's not the same. Excuse me, damn. You're talking about a different Pecatonica team, and that's true, but I don't think the score is really going to reflect that much difference this year. West Carroll is a very improved team. Played Lena Winslow very close on the road at Lena Winslow, which doesn't happen very often for many schools outside of your top Northwest teams. So in order to play them close, you consider them a top Northwest team.
Right, and I mean, Lena Winslow people tell you that, you know, Lee Win was up 28-6
Right.
before they changed scores a couple times there in the fourth quarter.
In and out.
So, yes, Lee Win pretty much controlled the game, but West Carroll had very good drives in the first half that just didn't result in scores on the scoreboard. And obviously, Lena Winslow took advantage of those opportunities and put up 14 points to take that 14-0 lead in the halftime. But if you look at the second half, they played to a 20-20 tie in the second half, regardless of the situation. So had West Carroll been able to clean some things up there in the first half, it definitely could have been a much tighter and a much tighter game than it had been by the score of being 34-20. Granted, Lena Winslow won by 2 scores, but being up 28-6, I mean, they're up 3 scores.
Right. And then on the other side of the ball, you're looking at Du-Pec, who, you know, coming into that game, you're feeling the hype. You got a new co-op. Things are looking
senior night.
You're looking good. You know, new coach. You're feeling pretty good, but unfortunately, you drew the wrong straw. I mean, Forreston is everything that they were advertised to be. I mean, you ran up against the 1A state champions and possibly the 1A state champions in 2017. Obviously, we got a lot of games played. We won't get into that. It gets a little easier against West Carroll, but not enough to make this a close game, in my opinion.
Yeah, like you said, let's not crown Forreston as state champs. In my opinion, yes, they're the champs until they're beat.
Correct.
But they haven't won anything in 2017.
Right.
And, but they are the number 1 ranked team. They do have a lot of players coming back. And they're definitely a team to be reckoned with. But until we see an NUIC team that actually can win back-to-back state finals, I don't think we should be crowning Forreston state champs anytime soon until they prove it. So, but Du-Pec, they did have a tough opponent, obviously. Definitely need to restructure some things. It doesn't get any easier as they travel to Mount Carroll to play West Carroll on Friday night. West Carroll will be ready. West Carroll knows they need to win this game in order to have a shot at the playoffs.
Right.
And to be honest, Shane, they're my pick to win.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree. I do think Du-Pec is going to get in the win column at some point this season. I just don't see it being against West Carroll.
And I agree with that. Our upstate game of the week brings us to Milledgeville, where they are going to play host to the Polo Marcos. Both these teams come in with 1-0 records. Last week, Polo beat Orangeville in a very good, close fought game, 20-12. And Milledgeville did the same thing in a 14-6 win over Amboy. Last year, Shane, in this matchup, Polo won this game 13-0. But I don't see the Missiles getting shut out in this game this year.
No, the Milledgeville Missiles are a much improved team from last year. You know, we talked about the returning starters that they had. Group that in with the upcoming now junior class. A lot of talent. Polo, you know, played Orangeville, was outgained by the Broncos and still came away with a win. So that speaks volumes too, as what you can expect going into this game, because I feel Milledgeville is slightly ahead of Orangeville at this point in time of the season. And then you look at Milledgeville's game, and they kind of played a clunker against Amboy and still came away with a close win. Those two things together might not bode well for Polo in this matchup.
So, I can see that as well. Milledgeville, I feel, has a lot more coming back than Polo does on both sides of the ball. I could still say this is one of them games that's going to be a great game to watch, and it's almost one of those where you just take a coin, flip it, heads your Polo, tails your Milledgeville, and boom.
I like that. We should do that.
Well, I'm not going to because I have a feeling of what I want to pick, but I'll leave your pick to you. If you want to flip a coin, go for it.
For this.
But no, I think this game's going to be a very good game. Granted, it's only week 2. Both these teams have a long ways to go. We can see both of them getting into the playoffs later down the road. But this one would have implications of being closer to the top of the conference, chasing down Aquin later on in the season as well.
Right, I could definitely see that. This is one of those games, like you said, is going to be very entertaining, I believe. We picked it for the upstate game of the week for a reason. I mean, this shouldn't disappoint.
No, it shouldn't. Unfortunately, our Northwest game of the week did last week, but our upstate game was pretty much right on, and we feel this one is going to be right on as well. Polo with Reed Taylor, and then you got Braden Solto there, and Milledgeville. I mean, Nate Ron took over that game for Milledgeville against Amboy last week, and they got a pretty solid defense. I think their defense is going to be a little bit more stout than Polo's, but I mean, time's going to tell. But I do like Milledgeville in this game.
Yeah, and I do too. I mean, all the things that we've listed, I think Polo was fortunate enough to come away with a win against Orangeville. I just don't see him being as fortunate this week.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Milledgeville's just got a little bit too much more talent on both sides of the ball. I think it's going to be a very close game. Not saying Polo can't win. I'm just picking Milledgeville to win.
And Milledgeville at home, Milledgeville is a tradition-rich football town. Not always good, but the years they have been good, they've been really good. So, football runs deep at Milledgeville. Same with that Polo here lately. So, should be an exciting game. But like I already stated, I got the Missiles.
Yeah, I think the Missiles will be ringing their victory bell. All right, our Northwest game of the week brings us to a matchup where both teams come ranked numbers 1 and 3 in the Class 1A state rankings. We're talking about Lena Winslow at Forreston. Last week, Lena Winslow beat West Carroll 34-20, while Forreston took care of Du-Pec 54-6. Shane, last year these two teams got the opportunity to meet twice, once in the regular season, obviously, and then the second time in the quarterfinals. The first game, Forreston won 13-7, and that game was kind of marred by some turnovers by both sides, but then in the second half, Forreston really took control of the game. The second game, however, yes, there was more turnovers involved, but it was more of a one-sided affair as Forreston pulled away in that game 44-7. This game's in Forreston. It also last year also marked the first time that Forreston ever beat Lena Winslow in Forreston. So, Forreston's had a hard time with Lena Winslow at home, believe it or not, and we're talking about week 2, the 2 of the top 3 teams in the state squaring off, and you got the defending state champs.
Right. I got so much to talk about it. It's almost like you're sitting here and you're wondering what you're going to say because there's so much to digest with this game. The number one thing that really makes me mad, we opened at the beginning of the video as I said that this was week 2. Lena Winslow has a history of playing slow to start out the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen here. But come on, week 2. I would have loved to see this week 7, 8, heck, even the end of the year, really gearing up towards playoffs. But you play them when you play them, so here we are. It's basically like beating a dead horse. We've talked about Forreston so much over the last 2 years and how much they have and the weapons they have and the speed they have and the size and the conditioning. And you start looking at Forreston games and you match up all these teams to them and you wonder how are they going to be beat. My opinion hasn't changed one bit, whether it's Lena Winslow playing them or EPC or Dakota or whoever this time. If Forreston's going to lose a game this year, it will be because Forreston beats Forreston. I'm not changing from that. I think Lena Winslow has an excellent team. I think it'd be a close game later in the season. I just don't see Lena Winslow playing with Forreston.
Wow, that's
It's a statement.
that is a statement, and that's pretty bold right off the bat. But I mean, you're right. I mean, Lena Winslow historically has issues playing at the beginning of the season against top-tier teams. And believe it or not, I mean, and I don't blame him for this, but Coach Aaron is always very careful on his game plans, especially against teams that he could potentially see come playoff time.
Right, and I want to stop you right there for just a second. And you said what I said was bold, and I just want to throw this out here. This game might affect positioning, but this has no bearing on the playoffs whatsoever. You know, we saw a 3-loss Lena Winslow team win state. So realistically, this game, in all intents and purposes, is meaningless for the playoffs because both teams will be there.
Exactly. I mean, this game is basically only coming down to conference title implications. It has no bearing on what we're looking at further down the road in the playoffs. Because we all know that when it comes playoff time, Lena Winslow's ready to roll. Rick Aaron has all the pieces together.
Exactly.
And we haven't even seen all them pieces come together yet for Lena Winslow.
I mean, how many times haven't we seen the younger ranks at Lena Winslow up and playing significant playoff minutes at the end of the year?
Right. And we haven't seen that yet.
Right.
And I know it's coming. It's going to come eventually.
Right.
Once they get where they want to get to.
Right.
And then Coach Aaron will start rolling in the kids. Hey, you're getting playing time. You're getting playing time. And all of a sudden, they're on a train rolling down. So.
Exactly. So I don't want that to be misconstrued as me saying Forreston has no chance all year to beat Forreston. That's simply not true.
Just this week.
Right. Just this week.
But I agree with you because Forreston is clicking on all cylinders. Forreston will be in better shape than Lena Winslow. There's no doubt about that. Lena Winslow will not be ready for Forreston this time. Not saying they won't be next time.
I'll take Forreston too.
I will too. So that's a wrap for our Week 2 matchups and predictions. Look forward to some really good contests like we said at the introduction of our segment here tonight. But Shane, where are you heading this week?
Gonna go to Aquin, watch the Warren Warriors take on the Aquin Bulldogs. 7 o'clock kick, I believe.
Excellent. Myself and Carrie are heading to Forreston. We'll be there for the big Forreston-Lena Winslow matchup and senior night in Forreston. And we'll also get some coverage from the EPC Amboy game and the Galena East Dubuque game as well. So that pretty much wraps up what we have this week. So as always, root for the NUIC.